you always kind of catch yourself in, or at least I've been trying to do, is have a curious attitude on things, everything.
Hello there, it's me, Steve Mellor, and welcome in to GrowthReady, the podcast that allows high performers to reveal the reality behind what it means to ready yourself for growth, the personal and professional challenges along the growth journey, while also allowing the high performance executive coach in me to satisfy his curiosity toward what drives optimal performance. On this episode, we welcome in founder of Wealth Elevator, Lane Kawaoka. And having benefited so much from community over the years on his growth journey, Lane challenges us to consider who we surround ourselves with, because we need people that will ready us to first consider and then support what's possible. Hey guys, as we get started here with the episode, I want to just take 1 minute of your time to make a request for you to subscribe and rate the show. For our show to be easily discovered by other potential listeners, we need our current listeners, that's you, to take the time to not only subscribe, but to also rate the show. Whether you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, whatever platform of choice, there are typically ways to be rating the show. So go ahead and click something like that 5th star and be sure to take that additional time to leave a comment or two about why it is you enjoy listening to the Growth Ready podcast. Your efforts on this will allow our show to be more discoverable, which means we're going to find more listeners and continue to have that significant impact on the community of human performance and personal development that I know you are all benefiting from by being listeners to this show. Please go ahead, take the time, subscribe, rate the show today. Hey, and while you're at it, why don't you share it with a few people as well? I appreciate you guys. Let's get to the interview. Hello there, and welcome into the most recent installment of Growth Ready. I'm so excited to be welcoming in all the way from Honolulu, Hawaii today. That's a first for us, actually. We've never had anybody from Hawaii before, from all around the world, but not Hawaii. Lane Kawaoka is joining us today, and I'm really excited about some of the unique qualities of Lane's story, which we're going to get into as we go through the conversation. But Lane, I'm not going to let you get out of here without answering the question that I have everybody ask as we get started today. What would it mean to you to be growth ready?
I guess, something I've been catching myself on lately is always to kind of go into meetings or interactions with a curious mindset. Sometimes I can get into thinking I already got the answer, or, that won't work, this won't work. We've already tried that, especially kind of in the world of marketing. You try different things, but if you always kind of catch yourself in, or at least I've been trying to do, is have a curious attitude on things, everything.
I like the term catch yourself. It's a heightened level of awareness is what I'm hearing straight away, just to be more deliberate in that curiosity. So tell me how you maybe came to this awareness. Where did this need to lead with curiosity, if you will, originate from?
Well, I have a coach, and he kind of called me out one day. He's like, "Dude, you just keep shooting my ideas down." I'm like, "All right, yeah, touche, I got it."
It's a good coach.
But yeah, I think that's why you got coaches, right? Yep. I mean, most times we're just telling ourselves BS, or working on the wrong things, or working on things that make us feel good instead of what actually moves the needle forward. So, I mean, that's why. I have an executive coach, and I have a couple of business advisor groups of peers. But yeah, the peers aren't going to really keep you accountable like a coach will. That's for sure.
Sure. Well, there's nothing more I like than a very short advertisement for coaching on the front end of my podcast, no doubt about it. But the fact is that something I'm hearing is your ability to have that willingness to welcome challenges, to welcome this awareness, welcome the accountability. So I would love for you just to maybe even share with our listeners, for anyone who's maybe not used to having coaching, not used to being part of peer groups and things like that, what is it in your journey when you just think about the course of it so far? Where was it that you felt that the importance of welcoming this challenge, welcoming these other voices, welcoming this heightened sense of accountability, if you will? Because it sounds as though you're definitely going out, finding it and bringing it towards you, as opposed to maybe waiting for that sort of thing to show itself in a more organic way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's how I use it today. But initially, I use these types of organizations and groups more as like to give me confidence, kind of coming at from the opposite
Hmm.
way. I think a lot of, I guess I would say, smart people are usually a little too humble, right? And maybe I put myself in that camp.
Hmm.
And to know that, hey, I fit in this group of high performing executives, or these other people with the same amount of ability and similar business sizes, some bigger, some smaller, are doing these next level things, and why can't I do that, right? And at the end of the day, you are the five people you hang out with most.
Hmm. Did it get to a point where it hurt you, or was humility just something that initially brought you, let's say, to the door of some of these opportunities of going into some of these experiences?
Well, I look back at when we started the firm, prior to 2018. I was coming at it and trying everything. The saying is you always say yes to everything.
Hmm.
Somebody sends you some type of conference here, like, yeah, why not? Let's go, right? Like, you got to meet people,
Yeah.
especially in our industry. At some point, you become a little bit more selective,
Hmm.
right? Maybe a little bit too selective. And when you think of what you got you here, at least for us in the real estate investment world, it's about meeting the right people.
Hmm.
Yeah, and you got to obviously select the right events. Typically, the more expensive ones with the higher caliber people are the ones to go with. But it is, kissing a lot of frogs at the end of the day. But this is where the magic happens. And, sometimes I catch myself, well, maybe I should, I didn't really, wasn't inclined to do that because I was being more selective. But, that's not really got us to this point.
It's one of my favorite insights is because it context is so important when we say what got us here won't get us there, for instance. Like, and that's very much what you're alluding to right now. Because on the flip side of that, there's some people that give up on things that work really well for them and ignore things that have worked well for them. And if only they'd stop to realize that what got them here may in fact continue to get them there. So just contextually, I think for anybody listening, because it is one of those terms that sometimes just get thrown out. You see it on like an Instagram post or a graphic. It just says, "Hey, remember, what got you here won't get you there." Contextually, I think what would you think is important for someone to consider when there is this need to potentially change? Because that's what you're alluding to here. It's like, hey, whatever got me to where it was I was at wasn't necessarily going to get me to where I felt I was capable of getting. Like, what are some of those signs you would say, at least from your own experience, where you felt the need for change, the need for challenge was necessary at that certain juncture of your life?
What got us here isn't going to get us to where we want to be. For us, like, we used to invest in a lot of real estate, and we still will. We would upgrade, 50, 100 unit apartment complex initially, and then stepped up to bigger assets and started to develop. But right now, from 2022 to 2025, you got, high interest rates, and that's not going to be coming around decreasing under 3%, the Fed rate I'm talking about, in the next
Hmm.
decade.
Sure.
So it's a changing of the guard, essentially. And so over the last couple of years, we've been looking to buy businesses, get into different avenues where interest rates aren't really a huge impact to us in a bad interest rate environment. So that's an example of, externally, we need to look at different things. Now, internally, I think like what got us here is connecting with the right people, using our network to vet other people to bring into our circle, to find better deal flow. That's how we find a lot of deal flow is, people say, well, you guys are a little bit all over the place. Well, the common thread is the people, right?
Mm.
So what got us here was connecting and building real relationships with other general partners, business operators, and kind of navigating the world that way in this disconnected world and creating our own community of investors. I think one thing that's been said by some of my closest people is, we do a really good job, or at least I do a really good job of filtering in the right people.
Mm.
I have one-on-one conversations with every single person that joins my community to all the little passive investor. The reason why I do that is obviously if we work together, we're going to be stuck with each other for a long time. But also, what I use as a barometer is like, do I want this person to come out to Hawaii to one of our retreats and interact and possibly be a negative experience that somebody else does? I don't want that to happen.
Mhm.
So that's where, I think that's what got us here. And that is like, you leverage your skill sets and you keep doing that.
Mm.
internally, but externally, like I said, you got to keep doing different things.
The internal versus the external, I think we're going to touch on that a little bit more as we go through this, because one thing I want to do before we go much further is just get a little bit more lay of the land of the business that you're operating today. That you've given us a number of different insights already in just these first few minutes. I'd love for you just to give us this, minute or two, just explanation of what is the business that you're operating today? What are the focus areas of the business today?
Yeah, so we work with high net worth investors and small business owners to get a part of their portfolio in alternative investments. And then originally, when we first started, those alternative investments would be real estate investments. Because that was how I grew my portfolio.
Mm,
2009, I bought my first rental property, bought a few more in Seattle, Washington. Then by 2015, I had 11. And at that point, I started to buy apartments. And then that
mm,
was kind of when the number count exploded from there. So that's what I realized is when you buy real estate, you get a lot of great tax benefits. And this is the suite of strategies that I found that a lot of accredited investors do is pretty commonplace. And, my parents weren't super wealthy. I didn't have a rich uncle. I didn't know any accredited investors when I was kind of growing up in my 20s, building my portfolio. And I realized that not a lot of people had the same experiences or the ability to connect with other people like I did. So a lot of people are still maybe 10, 20 years behind myself. So we teach people kind of the strategies of the wealthy. And, I wrote a lot of this in my book, The Wealth Elevator, of the different floors of the wealth elevator. You go
mhm,
through different stages of investing, mostly tied to where your net worth is, right? There's something that you do that's when you're under $1 million, $2 million net worth. There's something that you do from 2 to 5 million net worth and then beyond, right? As
mhm.
I've kind of gotten exposure myself to a lot of what do you do when you start to become more of a family office? Right?
Sure.
Your job is not trading time for money in your business or working a job, but your job is just investing the funds that you do have for long term.
Yeah. It's uh it's it's even more fascinating when you just think about the time that you've done this during. Like you were like, there's been so much change in the world when you think of coming through something like COVID, when you think of the administration changes, all these different outside influences now to bring it back to this internal, external. I'm curious, like, what was it about your own skill set, as you alluded to there, like that internal part of this that you really do have the control? What do you feel it was about your internal skill sets that allowed you to navigate so much change when you think about just the sheer volatility of these worlds that you've been operating in the last 10 years?
Well, I think maybe I got lucky too, right? I started to connect with the right people and we started to do deals together.
Hmm.
Some people obviously didn't work out, but you find the good people out there and you stick with each other and you work together. And then, you step up from doing smaller deals to much bigger deals. It's not too much harder. I think that was one of the places where, you need a little bit of luck to get going in anything, especially to start a
Hmm.
business. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is, you know, at the end of the day, the curriculum, like the system, you find good alternative investments off of Wall Street or what they want you to invest in, the big institutions, and you get directly to the source and you do it with good people and you just sort of rinse, wash, repeat.
Hmm.
And along comes a lot of good tax benefits that the wealthy employ all the time. And it's just a way that I realize that, large family offices will do all day, every day, but it's very different than what we're all taught, working the day job or what people talk in the cubicle land. And that's the frustrating thing. For the average guy, it's not inaccessible what to do.
Hmm.
It's just very counterintuitive if people don't do it because that's not what our parents taught us to invest in.
Now we end up all the way back at one of those earlier points in the conversation of this sounds as though it's kind of a natural tendency for you to at least go and acquire what otherwise may go against what you have initially been taught or what you've initially been exposed to, whether it be through family, through education, whatever it is. It's almost as though I'm hearing that you have this sort of set of antennae that are just up at all times. Like, what else is out there? What else do I not know? And it comes back almost to that initial insight around curiosity too, is that for you to always have one eye on what's going on externally, for you to have one eye on ways that we can become educated in ways that we otherwise aren't educated. Curious, like how much, when you made that conscious shift recently towards curiosity, how much were you able to go back and look maybe over the years that there was some, in fact, some evidence maybe that you were, in fact, a curious being all along?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably was. I mean, when I was back in 2009, not a lot of people buy little rental properties right after buying their first house to live in. So obviously, a little bit different than the average bear at that point. And then a couple of years later, buying a duplex, I mean, who does that in their 20s? So I already kind of knew I was a little bit different than the average person out there. But I think this is where engineers are very common in this investment world because we look at the numbers and we're like, this works. I pick up a property for $1,000 a month that rents, my debt service is 500, this works, right? The numbers make sense. In a way, a little bit autistic to the fears and the risks, right? That,
Mm,
are there, but I think that's where some people who are a little bit more creative or, wide open minded, can get they wouldn't move forward because they would see the risks and the issues more so than the big thing, which is, this thing brings in $1,000 a month rent. The expenses are 800, almost worst case scenario. Sure, things could happen, but that's every month, a couple $100, right? In that
yeah,
single family home example.
yeah. Yeah, and you've alluded to it there, this background that you had in engineering, and now that you start to piece this together for me a little bit more, it does start to make a bit more sense in the fact that when we have math, when we have math, then it's some of the most, if we allow ourselves to look at the math with simplicity as opposed to create complications with looking at more risks and more other external influences, that maybe the math and math alone can actually help us see that, oh, this is a smart decision, this is what we should be doing. But something I definitely wanted to get to here was this transition of yours to go from this world of engineering to move full time into the business that you have today. You talk about transition as much as we should on a podcast that is themed around growth. And growth, if it's not anything, sorry, if growth's anything, it's inconsistent, it's different, it's ever changing. And so transition, I feel like, is very ever present in the growth journey. So what was it about that transition that I guess made sense? Maybe it didn't. Maybe it did come with some more sort of human fears of making a jump from one career to a different career. But talk to us a little bit about that choice behind the transition and maybe why you were able to do it successfully.
Yeah, so I guess this is gonna resonate with people, working a side gig as their main job.
Mm,
At least that's how I feel everybody should do it because that was my experience. But the engineering job is very stable. You're not gonna get very wealthy by doing that, but it is very stable. And if you can get to a point where you don't really have to work too much at your day job, you can start to peel off other time energy to doing your side gig, which
mhm,
for me was buying little rental properties on the side.
mm,
I use professional property management because, that's what they're there for. You have to pay them 10% of the rents, but that allowed me to focus on my highest and best use, which was being a junk engineer. It was okay, right?
yeah.
And that allowed me to get a paycheck, which I was pretty good at saving, right? That was my big thing. Personal finance 101. I was pretty good at that type of stuff.
Sure.
So, as I kind of kept moving along, again, I think 2015 was a big inflection point when I had 11 rental properties, started to realize that there was a level beyond that buying apartments, but there was a period there of a few years where I was working an engineering job and, with these big apartments, um, and with, customers and investors and had to juggle all of that, literally had the Apple MacBook and three finger swipe left, right. I actually forget how to do it because I don't really, don't have two
Do
lives
that anymore.
anymore.
Right.
Just everything is my business now on my computer. So
Mm,
uh, that was where, yeah, there was a while there that I had kind of double life going on.
mm,
And yeah, sure, there was a point where you had to burn the boats, but for me, it was a pretty natural progression
yeah.
on how I did it. And I always tell people, well, yeah, you could take you can take, I think what most people say, well, just do it. Take the leap of faith, right?
Yeah.
But I'm very against that. I'm like, just make sure you have proof of concept in your business first, right? That you're able
Mm,
to at least pay for the minimal living expenses, whether that's a few grand a month. And then, because if you're bringing in money, then you have a viable business plan that's actually working.
yeah,
You have what the people in a tech role will say, you have product market fit.
yeah.
Without that, it's a huge gamble where this thing will even fly if you're even successful on it.
For me, what I like about what you're saying here is that even if you're not trying to start a business, become an entrepreneur, whatever it is, you're just looking at some form of transition in your life, whatever you're transitioning towards, to have some sort of evidence that this is a move that can have some momentum when you initially arrive at it, as opposed to starting from a complete dead end. Like I hear that. Interestingly enough, to bring it to my own story for a second, is that I wouldn't say I necessarily had proof of concept when I started my business. However, when I looked for some evidence, as I have done in the last 4 years of having this business, I've been able to say, okay, there was relationships, there was community, there was connection that existed that allowed for me to really create traction quite quickly. And I think even what you're alluding to here is just, is there any sign of evidence? Is there any sign that traction can occur or momentum can be created early on to at least have some of those basic essentials tailored to when you first start? But I almost like it as a sense of evolution for a human to think, what is my proof of concept for this next chapter that I have coming up in my life? Like, what is that next part of this growth journey that I'm trying to go towards? Because it's really what the other part of our show is about, the readiness. Like, it's not just the growth, it's, are you ready for the growth too? And so much of what you're alluding to here, Lane, I feel, is you did what you needed to on that front end to feel ready to make that initial jump and that initial transition, right?
Yeah, I mean, every business is different. I mean, if
Hmm.
you're like a real estate agent or mortgage broker, I mean, you don't really get as, paved path business moving forward. I mean, those guys to me are just salesmen, right?
Sure.
Like they're just a call. That's not really an entrepreneurial business.
Hmm.
I mean, some people get upset with me if saying that, but it's pretty paved road. It's a clean, proven system.
Sure.
Um, you know, business people have been coaching people for a while, right? Maybe in your vertical might be different, right? So that's a little bit more of a gray area. What I was doing, syndicating apartment buildings and real estate investments was something that I didn't really have exposure to out
Hmm.
there, right? I didn't know really anybody who did it, who wasn't second, third generation, who already had a network doing it. But I think what maybe where we're going here is you look inward and like, what is your talent base? What is your competitive advantage? If you were to do like a SWOT analysis, strengths,
Right.
weaknesses, opportunities, threats. But I guess that's the strengths and weaknesses that you have internally. What is it that are good for you? And how does that line up to the path you're moving forward? And maybe this is where a coach or a third party comes in. It's like, hey, Steve, you're just not good with people. You're an a-hole.
Sure. Yeah.
That doesn't align with what you need to be a coach, right?
Right.
Like,
Right.
you know,
No, it's and what I love about this is it kind of allows us to transition back now to what you're doing today, and this community that you speak of in terms of, you have folks that even commit as far as coming to meet with you there in person. And I'd have to assume that, and again, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds as though the majority of this community is based on maybe folks that were once in your similar position, maybe that don't necessarily have the means that some would typically have entering this world, but they're looking to get started. I'm just curious now, shifting towards that community, because you're in a way, you're now overseeing a community filled with people that are open to this transition, the same way that you decided that I wanted to navigate this transition back in the day. What are some of the telltale signs that folks are they've either given it the thought they need to give, or they're maybe not so ready as they typically probably should be when they think about some of these major transitions that it sounds as though this community is a part of?
well, I would, for me, the idea of starting to do all these events and, build the mastermind and, essentially build the ecosystem was, when I stepped into this world in 2016, I had a bunch of rental properties, but I didn't realize there was this world of accredited investors investing this way, doing taxes in a certain way. And that was my big aha moment. And that was the experience that I wanted to create for other people, this transformation of
Mm,
them doing it. And you weren't able to create it, or at least what I thought initially, and I still do today, the basic ingredients is fill the room, go to a cool place, and with accredited investors that are curated, so that's where the filtering. That's why I talk to pretty much everybody and get their vibe, and
Mm.
we filter the wrong people out. Um, and then once that point, now you just have, yeah, that's the magic. It's it, right? Like you already have people kind of all thinking the same way, um, that aren't all about their 401k or matching, getting the company match and all that nonsense and stuff like that.
Mm.
So that was, I think, where it initially started. And, I think from there, having that, I guess that's empathy, right? Like that was where I came from. So it was easy for me to know what somebody needed because that was what I needed myself at one time.
Yeah.
So it's refined over the years for sure, where, I think the next thing is like a lot of my clients are very similar to myself. We're introverts. I mean, I'm an introvert.
Yeah.
I don't really care to talk to this stuff with regular people. I'm just gonna get shut down,
Yeah.
and they're gonna think I'm crazy, right?
Yeah.
For investing in, 3 rental properties, right?
Right.
Now we got thousands, of course, right? But this is where, like I never really liked when I had to go to all these conferences and meet a lot of people. It was a struggle for me. But I'm an entrepreneur, right? I'm a lion. I'm gonna get it done.
Mm.
And if you're listening, you're probably the same way. But for most people out there, they don't really have that push. And that was
Mm.
my job, was to lead everybody else to that point. So I had to kind of create my events to a point where, it was a little bit more accessible to the average guy out there who was introverted, maybe a little bit socially awkward, right? I
Yeah.
mean, and to their point, it's like they're coming to Hawaii, they're meeting a lot of people that they don't know about, and they're higher net worth, so they have something to lose, right, from a privacy liability standpoint, and they're divulging a lot of personal information and
Mm-hmm.
financial information to people they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So what I've realized is like I never really like unstructured events or networking. I don't like that stuff. To me, it's a waste of time. It's
Yeah.
unstructured. So I try to keep a lot of the events that we do, like, other than the rant, the happy hour, which is, you always got to
Sure.
do that, right? But I try to keep everything curated. There's
Mm.
a point to everything. There's a speaking sheet. There's a table topic. Everything, I mean, it eventually goes off the rails, but at least there's a start to everything. So there, at least we're not just, a bunch of people hanging out in Hawaii.
Yeah.
There's purposes, there's guardrails. From this time, you're talking to these people about this. Then we're going to switch it up. We're going to keep it moving because, yeah, I mean, I get it. I'm not the one kind of person who has the gift of the gab. We just start BSing with people about some topic. No, I need some help,
Yeah.
right? So that was where empathetically I needed to kind of create something for my people. And, it seems like it resonates with a lot of people out there, especially in this day and age where we've gotten a little bit less social. Who knows? Maybe the Gen Zers, alphas out there who are supposedly socially inept, by the time they come up. But I don't think I'm be around that long for them to be, turn 50 and become my investor, to be honest.
Right.
But, I think that's more and more people, these days, they need a little bit of push in the right direction.
There's so much. Again, we're not a wealth podcast. We're not a real estate podcast. We're not any of those things. But we are a growth podcast, and I think so much of what you're talking to here helps us understand not only the value of community, but the structure that must come with it. Especially again in this one-off scenario that you're sharing with us about your business and your community, you're explaining the need for there to be a point to everything, for there to be guardrails, for us to have some sort of sign of forward progress being made at all times. And my immediate thought goes to, well, shoot, no matter where you are on your growth journey, no matter what you're doing and what industry you're doing it in, what does your equivalent community look like of that? Because for me, I hear that you're going above and beyond to ensure that no one feels as though their time is being wasted and what they're investing in outside of the investment itself, but what they're investing in is a further evolved version of themselves every time they experience this community. And I'm just curious as to when you think about the effectiveness of your community, not only the one you're providing to other people, but the one that as you've alluded to throughout this, you've created for yourself too. How much of that are we maybe as a society sometimes forgetting? Because we do, like you said, we have all these opportunities to network. We have all these opportunities to go to events, but it sounds as though there's some key components to community that you're a believer in, that you have proof of concept in, that maybe sometimes we're not necessarily respecting in the formation of these communities that we create for ourselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think what comes to mind is you never go to an uncurated networking event. First of all, everybody's just starting out. They're in it for themselves and they're trying to get to square one. And just a waste of time to me,
Yeah.
right? Like you're just gonna, it's like crabs in a bucket at that
Yeah.
point. I think that's what makes my event so tricky is, predominantly everybody's a credit investor. So net worth $1 million or greater, or they make over $250,000 a year. These people are not your go to every single freaking event, junkie, like how most entrepreneurs are out there.
Yeah.
And we all know who the influencers are that put those types of events are.
Yeah.
And that's where I knew from the start it needed to be very different than a typical, conference or event that, most of us, the entrepreneurs, will go to.
Mhm.
And yeah, I just don't really like wasting time too.
Yeah.
People come in, they want to learn about taxes and they hear some experiences from other people. They also want to learn about doing due diligence on deals. But I think what a lot of people don't realize is like social relationships are the currency of the wealthy. At the end of the day, they also want to find, 4 or 5 dudes or gals that they want to, have their family meet, right? Or the
Mhm.
families kind of keep connected over the years, 5, 10. Like we've been doing this for pretty much a decade now.
Yeah.
Those relationships have gone off into different places. I think those are the cool things that what I realized this all creates. At the end of the day, you invest, and you save money on taxes, you're going to get the financial freedom pretty quickly. It's more about the social relationships, but that's not what these guys come for initially,
Yeah.
right? So that's
Yeah.
that's kind of the vegetables and diet and exercise long term type of stuff. The initially what attracts them is like they want to check this world out. They want to make sure that they're thinking from a math basis, like, yeah, this all makes sense. Investing in apartments, for example, like, that's they don't make any more land. People need a place to live, especially this lower middle class. And it all makes sense, but it needs to be validated by other people who've also had a lived experience doing it too, is so
Yeah.
critical.
Yeah. And there's something that you're getting to there around just the need to do one's due diligence on the front end of, say, committing to a community, committing to an event. And then because of that, you then allow yourself to probably be there a little bit more comfortably, authentically, and who knows, maybe you develop these social relationships that come off the back of it through families and whatnot. And I think that's what I'm hearing through this is what you've been able to achieve and create. But what we can take away as listeners and just say, hey, what does that due diligence need to look like on the front end in the creation of a community so that when you maybe get into it and you structure it for yourself, you can feel more organic, more authentic once you're in there. And who knows, maybe that leads to, parts of your life being opened up but because of that. But one thing I wanted to get to here as well is that you talked about that, most folks don't necessarily have the push, if you will, to really get to where it is they may be capable of getting to. And I'm just curious when you think about obviously the world that you're operating in, most, if not all, folks seem to have that push in some way, shape, or form. But if you had to capture it maybe in your own life or just through what you've experienced, what would you say gives people that push? Because if it is as simple as like if you can get the push, then you can start to do the work. What is it that's helped you maybe over the years when you think back of like, hey, what was it that gave me the push? Or what is it that I've maybe seen other people do in order to get the push themselves?
I think the big thing is knowing it's possible, right? Like majority of people out there just think that, the 60/40 stocks, mutual funds, the stock ratio, and getting the 6 to 8% is the status quo,
Mm,
and there's nothing better that you can do. So then they focus on working harder at their job or their business. That's the traditional mindset, right? I
yeah.
guess what we're saying here is there's this world of alternative investments that, yes, you have to do your due diligence and it's going to require a tribe around you to do that. But, when it just increases those numbers and also when you add in the saving money on taxes, right? That at the end of the day hits the bottom line, which is your net worth.
Mm,
And, once you inevitably get to that net worth level in the second, third of the wealth elevator, you're kind of playing curator of your own destiny and your lifestyle at that point. But just knowing, like for me, it was, in 2015, I had 11 rental properties and I thought I was kind of hot stuff, right? I mean, what kid under, I think it was in my late 20s at that point, was becoming an accredited investor. And I realized like, whoa, there's like another world of all these other people.
Yeah.
Luckily, I was around, I'm always around people that are older than me, it seems like, but I was kind of gleaning from them that there was another world beyond what I was doing. And this is the
Mm.
world of investing in, apartment syndications, things like that. And even now today, I'm, constantly growing outside my bounds and realizing that investing in venture capital, buying businesses, private equity is kind of the next frontier that we build upon and we round out the portfolio, right? Like personally, like, I had a lot of real estate, probably a little bit too much for myself. And that was where, yeah, I think people need to realize that there's something beyond that they can strive for. But unless you get around other people, and at least like when I look back at like when I was buying properties out of state in 2012, I had a few rental properties in Seattle, but then I started to buy properties in Birmingham, Atlanta, Indianapolis. If I wouldn't have connected with a bunch of random people, I don't even know who they are nowadays, but
Sure.
like that were buying remote properties, I wouldn't have, number one, realized it was a thing. But second, more importantly, I wouldn't realize that I could do it too, just by talking
Yeah.
with these guys, right? And that's part of the experience of coming to one of these events is you meet these people, you drink a beer with them, and they're just a regular person. They may even be a lot dumber than you are, but there is, they're basking in what you want,
Yeah.
and it starts to realize that hey, I can do this, and everything that is put into this community is making it so I can be successful.
Mm.
There was something that I wanted to mention, Steve. Like,
Yeah.
I was having a conversation with AI the other day. That's
I
what
have those same
weirdos do.
I have those same conversations too. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, and I was asking it, like, how like I guess Sora 2 came out, right?
Hmm.
The video creation tool, and
Yeah.
we've been seeing a lot of this like AI schlop. Right
Yep.
now, everybody's a creator, right? Everybody's a Hollywood producer, can produce Marvel quality films, and or I could just make like a Frozen 2 film for my daughter if I wanted to,
Right.
right?
Right.
Doesn't take too much effort, and there's so much slop, right? They call it AI slop out there.
Yeah.
I think that there's going to be some type of like renaissance or like just people are just like, I'm tired of just, I don't know what's real.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that was the reason why people go through the Reddit feeds, right? Because it's like, oh, cool stuff that happens out there in real life, but now you don't know it's real and people just make stuff up, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, at the end of the day, what I think is this kind of renaissance, or I don't know, what do you call it when like the world collapses, right? Like you have a reset.
Yeah. Some
Like, I
sort of
think
reset.
people are going to be thirsting more for communities. And that's my
Mm.
big gamble here is people want an investment community. They want a financial community, which I'm creating here. And that you can't take away. AI cannot replace that, the human connection. And I think right now people are a little bit, they like to stay in their boxers at their computer.
Hmm.
But for investing, you cannot do that, right? Especially for high level investing. But soon for everything, you need to get out of your computer and and get and talk to people and build relationships with people because that's what makes you happy, at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And you can't just be appeased by all this AI schlop and the social media stuff. And to me, I think that's the future. And that's why I'm kind of making a big gamble on it. And especially in our world, like in the real estate investment world, there's all these like fake gurus out there that haven't done anything. And that was, I think, where it kind of upset me. I'm like, why are these guys have supposedly big communities and they haven't really done too much? When you really start to, I mean, I've gone to their events, there's a bunch of like, fake it till you make it people and newbies in
Yep.
those types of events. But like that at the end of the day, I think still people they flock to these epicenters for they want the knowledge, of course, but you can get all that on YouTube,
Yep.
really.
Yep.
But you want the connections with the other peers and that's I think what people really want at the end of the day.
Yeah. So much that I love about what you're saying. In that, I don't think you're gambling on. Like I understand what you mean by gambling on community, but I don't think it is a gamble because I couldn't agree more with you in terms of this reset that's coming, this renaissance that's coming. Because at the end of the day, whether it be community or whether it be value, which it sounds as though you're focusing on both when it comes to what you're offering, those are always going to win over time. That they're always going to outplay, outperform the so-called generational draws that come in the form of an influencer, that come in the form of AI, whatever it might be. And I experience it in my world too. I see it all the time. I watch coaches go on this and say, hey, do you want to achieve this in 6 weeks or whatever it is? And I look at it and I just go, that's not one, that's not coaching. Two, that's not longevity. If you want success in 6 weeks, you clearly don't have a good definition for success. You don't know really what that means. And you certainly don't know what coaching is. And so much of what you're alluding to here, firstly, I couldn't be in more agreement, but at the same time, what I love about where you led there is this idea that the push will come from the possibilities. It's just like to be able to say that if I can get clearer on what's possible, and that can come in the form of a community, that can come in the form of knowledge, whatever it may be. But if I can just simply get clarity on what's possible, will that be the push that I've always been looking for? Will that give me that added oomph when I need it most during those times where I'm maybe not as motivated and not engaged with whatever these possibilities that I thought were possible are? And so I'm just like, my last question, I guess, for you, Lane, is like, when you think about your own future right now, what is it that's creating possibilities for you that's keeping your push as high as it is? It's one thing I like to ask once in a while of entrepreneurs in your kind of position, because I have no doubt that folks are looking from the outside in at you and saying, brother, you've arrived. You've built what you've built. It's a success. What's keeping you keeping going and all this kind of thing. So talk to our audience a little bit about being in the position that you're in now. What keeps you hungry? What keeps growth as something that is appealing to you at this chapter in your journey?
Yeah, I mean, I think like my vision was always to kind of create like a school for investors who are accredited
Mhm.
that need to kind of get to that 8-figure mark. And I think I think I know what they want, but I have not created it into that curriculum or school quite
Mhm.
yet. And I think that's the goal, in the next decade. I think that the way that people learn, the community building, I think that will change. So that's the tricky part.
Yeah,
But I think I have an idea, vision of what I want to create in the future. And that's why every year, like the events kind of change a little bit,
for
right?
sure.
Like, so based on feedback or, ultimately people want to have a good time too, but also like, what is it that really, at the end of the day, I think what I'm trying to do is like, I try and set up, I want everybody to have a really good 15, 20-minute conversation with another person and at least get a chance to build that connection. How can I recreate this multiple times that weekend where it doesn't get boring
Mhm.
or forced or anything like that, but it naturally happens
Mhm.
in a way.
Well, if you made that your sole mission for the next 10 years, I think you're going to keep yourself pretty busy, because that's an offer, that's an experience that is hard to come by, to create so many unique connections, so many unique conversations. But the fact that you're trying to create it in an environment that sounds as though it's got so much direction, it's so intentional, gives you certainly more of an opportunity to achieve that. But I love the idea of the curriculum, the school, if you will, for folks that want to get to this kind of position too. So again, love hearing that insight around just where you're planning to get to, the work you're currently doing to get there. And before I let you go, Lane, because this has been an absolute blast, and I'm so glad that I've been able to learn from you and provide these insights for our listeners. But if anyone's listening to this conversation thinking, man, I definitely want to learn more about all of this that Lane's talking about, where might we go to learn about that?
Yeah, they can check out my book on Amazon, The Wealth Elevator.
Mhm.
And if you guys check out podcasts, my podcast, Wealth Elevator. If you're an accredited investor, shoot me an email, lane@thewealthelevator.com.
Awesome. So all that information will be in the show notes as well. But again, Lane, this has been great to get a little bit of insights on areas that I myself have maybe trying to educate myself on too. But at the same time, certainly giving us plenty of food for thought around just general growth journey concepts along the way. So, brother, I appreciate the time. Just best of luck with everything moving forwards.
Thanks, Steve.
And my thanks again to Lane for joining us on this episode. Let's talk community as we close this one out. We've definitely discussed community on previous episodes, but I want to really just get specific in the idea of the due diligence that comes with knowing what you need to, in terms of what you personally need before you go into a community. We live in a world right now where if you want to find a networking event, be it local or at some larger conference, you can find it. If you want to connect with someone, it's never been easier to do it. But what do you need in that connection? What do you need from that conference? What do you need from that community? How aware are you of that part of the equation? Because if you're really not aware, you're then allowing either the connection or the conference or the community to dictate for you what it is you need. Don't get me wrong, we want those kind of challenges. We want to have our curiosity evoked in some way from said community. But if you don't have a single thought, a single reason, a single why, or the way that we talked about it here today, a single push for why you're joining this in the first place, then maybe you're doing something that you don't need to be doing. Maybe you need to be focused more on focusing on yourself as opposed to focusing on a community first. Can you find that way? Can you find that direction toward yourself first and foremost before you start focusing externally on all the things potentially around you that could be influencing the direction that you go? So my thanks again to Lane for joining us on this episode. And as always, my thanks to you for taking the time to listen to the show. If this is the first time you're joining us, I appreciate you taking the time to do so, but don't let this be the last time. Make sure you're taking the time to subscribe to the show, leaving us a rating, and hey, go one step further and go ahead and share the episode with somebody in your community. They will thank you because the quality of this kind of content is there for itself to display. So again, my thanks for taking the time for listening. And as always, best of luck with anything and everything going on in your world. I look forward to doing this again with you very soon. Bye for now.
Thank you for tuning in to Growth Ready. If you liked what you heard and are feeling ready to grow, be sure to leave a 5-star rating, subscribe to the show, and share the episode with someone you know is ready to fuel their growth journey today. We love our community, so don't hesitate to reach out to us at podcast@growthready.com. And until next time, we are Growth Ready, and you will be too.